Good morning. It is so good to be here. My name is Carter Stewart. I'm with the Draper Richards Kaplan Foundation. We are one of the co-hosts, along with the Center for American Progress and John Jay. And I am privileged to welcome you back to the second day of the conference. And I also want to thank you for your flexibility yesterday. We had to have a sudden change of venue. And if you felt electricity in the air, it's because quite literally there was electricity in the air. There was an arc going back and forth between two transponders or something backstage. So thank you very much for your flexibility. Last year, when we put this on, we had over 500 advocates and activists sign up, and we had to go to a wait list. This year, we had over 700 advocates and activists sign up, and we had to go to a wait list. There is a hunger for events like this, for opportunities like this. There is a need for opportunities like this. I think Van Jones said it well last night at a wonderful event supporting incarcerated women when he said sometimes you have to have a breakdown to have a breakthrough. Sometimes you have to have a breakdown to have a breakthrough. And you would not be here in this room if you didn't think that our criminal justice system was broken. And it's folks like you who are going to help us turn this country around in that regard. Yesterday, Khalil Cumberbatch, when he was talking about the intersection between immigration justice and criminal justice, said that he would not be standing on this stage but for the advocates who supported him and who helped him get through his troubles and tribulations. Those are the advocates who are exactly like you. You are helping tens of thousands of people across this country stand on their stages and speak their truth. So I am so grateful and so thankful to be here and to be with you. We are obviously not going to solve all the problems in this conference, but the conversations that have continued here, that are starting here, they will at some point. And I dream for the day when we don't have to have conferences like this, but for now we do, and it is wonderful to see all of you. So it is my pleasure to introduce your first speaker this morning, Governor Mary Fallin. She was elected the first woman governor in Oklahoma in 2010. During her 2 terms, she signed bills to modernize and streamline government operations. She cut the income tax, increased compensation to public employees, and she also helped address the state's pension system. She has signed into law a historic lawsuit reform and also overhauled the state workers' compensation system. And she's endorsed packages from the House and Senate of Oklahoma to reform the state's criminal justice system. She has a long history of public service. Prior to serving as governor, she served 2 terms as a state representative and then became Oklahoma's first Republican and first woman lieutenant governor in 1995. After serving as lieutenant governor for 12 years, she served 2 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives from 2007 to 2011. Please join me in welcoming Governor Fallin.
Good morning. Let me just start out this way. And Carter, first of all, let me just say thank you for your organization and what it does to help with innovative solutions to being smarter on crime. His organization helps fund some of those programs, and we appreciate that. But let me just start this way. How many of you have never known anyone that's had a substance abuse problem that might have gotten in trouble with the justice system? Does anybody not know anybody? I got to see your hands. That's what I thought. You know, I think all of us may have had a relative, a friend, a high school classmate, college classmate, or maybe even a coworker that might have had some type of addiction issue with prescription drugs, or maybe even something worse that might have ended up in the criminal justice system. But the reality is that I think all of us have known someone at one point in time in their life that have had some challenges and ended up in our criminal justice system, whether it's in a county jail or possibly even a state prison. This is an issue that's been very important to me for a long period of time, and one that I've worked on. In 1991, which was the year that I took office 20 years ago or so as a legislator, one of the things that I found out about Oklahoma and my state is that we were #1 in the nation incarcerating women. And we still are, by the way. And throughout the years that I've had the opportunity to serve, and I've worked on this issue for a long time, I've met with incarcerated people. I've met with people who have been out of prison. I have met with children who had their parents incarcerated and had a discussion with them about how did it affect their lives when a parent, or maybe even both parents, were incarcerated in prison. What are some of the challenges that they face? And of course, one of the statistics that we know is that if a child has a parent who is in prison, that they're 5 times more likely to end up in the system themselves. So that's where a lot of my interest came into this, because as a governor now, I work with foster kids, I work with children that are abused, certainly with poverty, low-income people, and just trying to help people have a better quality of life. So back in 2003, when I was lieutenant governor, I worked with a group called the Status Commission of Women to look at why we incarcerate so many women in the state of Oklahoma and some of the challenges that we had. One of the things that we found was that a large majority of the women who are incarcerated for a crime or something else may have had some type of substance abuse issue and probably were a victim of domestic violence or sexual assault in their life. So in 2011, when I became governor, I still found that things weren't changing as rapidly as they should, and then I got in a position where I could do a little bit more about it. We know right now in the state of Oklahoma that our prisons are way overcrowded. We're at about 117% capacity, which makes it dangerous for the people that work in our prisons. It also means that we're sending a large population of people in our state to prison, which means they're out of the workforce, they're not supporting their families. And once again, let me always say that anyone that's a danger to communities or to their families or to themselves and have done something need to be locked up. But those that have some type of low-level offense that is related to substance abuse or just a huge mistake, there are other ways of dealing with that. And that's what we try to do, is be smart on crime. And looking at the numbers and our statistics, the growing population that we have, we know that over the next 10 years, we're going to have to spend somewhere close to $2 billion, build 2 new prisons for men and 1 new prison for women, if we keep on this same trend of sentencing people the way we have and incarcerating them. And of course, we're not real proud of the fact that we're #1 in women, but just last year we became #1 in incarcerating men. We surpassed Louisiana, so still not good numbers. We knew that unless some type of comprehensive criminal justice reform was done in our state, that our prison population was going to actually increase about 25% over the next 10 years, which is not that far away. And of course, that costs the taxpayers billions of dollars, and it also keeps people out of the workforce and away from their families, and the children end up in foster care or some other type of care with a relative. The female population in Oklahoma is expected to grow another 60% at the rate we're incarcerating our women. Once again, a lot of them are related to substance abuse issues. So Oklahoma's journey in significant criminal justice reform started about 3 to 4 years ago, when we started really getting serious, because we just couldn't afford to keep building prisons in our state. Plus, it was not improving our quality of life. So we sought to find ways to keep people from going to prison in the first place through different type of programming, to adjust some of the laws that we have on criminal justice in our state, and certainly to reduce the number of people in prison beds themselves. We, once again, want to be smart on crime. Those that are violent offenders, will certainly keep them locked up to keep people safe, but we do think there's a more effective, cost-efficient way that we can deal with our people in our criminal justice system. So we worked really hard to find the best practices that were evidence-based, metrics-driven data solutions that could help with our criminal justice growth. And so over the past 3 years, I had a task force, a criminal justice task force. We brought together anyone and everyone we could think of, whether it was victims advocates, our nonprofits, our chambers of commerce, our district attorneys, our judges, our mental health professionals, all kinds of groups that work with these types of populations. Corrections certainly has wonderful information. And we developed a comprehensive plan of data to know where we stand, how people get into the system. And we found out one of the interesting facts is that 75% of our people sentenced in prison are non-violent offenders. It's interesting. And comparing that to other states, we found that we sentence people, because of our numbers, to prison more than other states, and that we also didn't give people, when they came up for parole, we didn't always process them as fast, and we didn't always give them that parole. So after 7 months of studies, we came up with 27 recommendations, policy recommendations to, once again, save beds, the prison beds for serious, dangerous offenders, do something to strengthen our community supervision, do more community supervision, hopefully reduce recidivism, hold offenders accountable, and also, of course, provide better support for the victims of crimes themselves. Many of these provisions that we worked on laid the groundwork for our 2017-2018 legislative session. So over the years, we passed those things. We also had, by the way, 2 state questions that passed that the majority of Oklahomans voted to change those measures. So all these measures that I'm talking about passed in a bipartisan way. Both Republican and Democrat members supported them. So I wanted to show you a couple of things that we've done. I'll start with this slide here, which shows the things that we tried to accomplish. One is to reduce the flow of nonviolent offenders into our prison, establish more efficient, streamlined parole process, facilitate successful reentry. We've got a second slide that we will show you. And here's some of the things that we worked to accomplish. We expanded our opportunities for expungement among those convicted of no more than 1 nonviolent felony, and if they had no other previous convictions or pending charges in the last 7 years. We eliminated mandatory minimum sentences and gave judges more flexibility on sentencing for second-degree burglary and third-degree burglary. We reduced enhanced sentences for certain repeat nonviolent offenders, and we created a risk and needs assessment for those who were sentenced to prison to actually find out, is it a mental health problem, substance abuse problem, or are they just a criminal that is dangerous? Next slide, we changed the penalties for commercial drug offenses and distinguished conduct by possession with the intent to distribute and manufacture. We adjusted penalties and measures on low-level property offenses, as listed there. We created an administrative parole process for nonviolent offenders, and we gave them a case plan that they had to comply with so that the Pardon Parole Board, once again, could focus on more serious offenders. And then we established even a geriatric parole. You know, a lot of people get really old or may have a life sentence in prison, and work towards addressing those issues. We also signed a measure that was very important to me, and I think we've had a lot of discussion around our nation about shackling pregnant women. We signed that into law this past year to give pregnant inmates more dignity in how they're treated. One, reclassified, I think I got some more slides here. We reclassified simple drug possession and low-level property crimes from felonies to misdemeanors. That was something that makes a huge difference in how many people end up in prison. We provided funding to address mental health and substance abuse issues. Slide 4, other criminal justice things that we did required offenders to receive a validated risk and needs assessment that will help guide the providers into truly the type of services they need, and mandated that corrections provide an individual case plan for every offender. Of course, training is always important for law enforcement people, especially as it relates to domestic violence cases and victim safety, especially at the pre-trial stage. We provided more training for our public defenders and certainly our district attorneys and judges. Slide 5, we gave prosecutors discretion to file charges on non-85% crimes on misdemeanors instead of felonies. We reduced the minimum mandatory punishment for drug offenders charged only with possession. We raised the threshold on property crimes from $500 to $1,000. If you stole a cell phone, you'd get a felony if it cost $500. Now it's up to $1,000. We established broader means for drug courts and certainly community sentencing. And in addition to these things, we also had to work on our budget. And so I have a slide that talks about some of the funding things that we did, because that's typically what you find as a challenge in the state is the funding. We allocated over $100,000 to put 2 more pardon parole inspectors, 2 more pardon parole board members on the board so we could speed up the parole process for those waiting for parole. We established a very innovative program called Pay for Success with $500,000, And that basically is a program that's a public-private partnership to work with nonprofits that help with substance abuse. Slide 7, we added $4.8 million to a new offender management program that would be one statewide database so that we could track people throughout the system, and another $17 million in supplemental appropriations for correction officers, and even doing things like replacing locks, that many of them were broken in some of our prisons. And of course, as I mentioned a few moments ago, the Pay for Success. The next slide shows Women in Recovery. And this program is a very unique program that we have in Oklahoma that basically takes women who are sentenced to prison, gives them the opportunity to go into a recovery program that has education, training, helps them find a job, substance abuse, counseling to put their families together, reunification. Very successful program, very low recidivism rate, gets women back out into their communities and taking care of their families. And those are some of the innovative things we do. Slide 10, I'll tell you real quickly as I finished here. In 2012, we kept working on evidence-based risk and needs assessments for just diverting people, screening people before they go into the system. And now we have 100% of all of our felony convicted people going through this needs and risk assessment, which helps our courts and helps basically some of the inmates just stay in the county jails for maybe a year instead of ending up into our prison system. Slide 11 shows just some of the diversion on a graph that you can see that only 17% end up in prison once we go through all these screening processes. The next slide shows that we use drug courts. I think hopefully everybody uses drug courts. Had the opportunity to go to a graduation ceremony just recently. Great success rate. It costs about $5,000 to put somebody through drug court, whereas it's $19,000 to send someone to a prison system. And then lastly, one of the things we do is that we offer workforce training for our inmates. And so we teach them when they're in our prison systems. We have about 17 that we do it in, how to be a heating and air mechanic, how to be a chef. Ladies go to cosmetology school. There's some plumbing, some other things that we give them a training in. And this year we had 1,800 inmates who went through that training so that when they end up finishing their terms, hopefully they can be able to get out and be able to be more successful. There are other things that we did. My time is limited, but as you can see, there are things that you can do to be smart on crime, but also keep dangerous people that might be on the street locked up. And we're very proud of what we've been doing in Oklahoma. And I just appreciate everyone here and throughout the nation that is working on this very important topic to help us keep our families together and hopefully divert people from going to prison in the first place. Thank you so much.